Hello, this is Dr. Eric Bricker, and thank you for watching AHealthcareZ. Today's topic is postpartum depression, which is the complication that employers need to worry about, in my opinion. So, believe it or not, labor and delivery is actually the #1 cause of hospitalization in America. That's right. There were 3.9 million stays in hospitals in America for labor and delivery. The statistic's a little on the old side. It's from 2010, but it's the most recent one that I could find. Okay, and guess what? #2 is not even close. It's pneumonia at 1.1 million visits, right? So it's like a quarter of what the maternity, the labor and delivery visits are, right? And all the other ones like osteoarthritis and CHF, like they're not even close either. And so of course the vast majority of women that are having babies they're not on Medicare, right? So they're either going to be Medicaid self-pay or they're on employer plans. And we used to see this all the time at Compass, where a company that especially had a lot of younger employees, that labor and delivery or maternity, childbirth related services was typically in the top 3 diagnostic categories for healthcare costs for their health plan, right? So typically it's like cancer, musculoskeletal, and cardiovascular. But if they're a younger employee population, typically the cardiovascular or the cancer was replaced by labor and delivery. Okay, so I would hear all these like really smart people talking about, okay, what's your surgical complication rates and complication this. Okay, the most important complication rate that you as an employer need to be concerned about is postpartum depression, which is the most common complication from labor and delivery. So the most common cause of hospitalization, and it's the most common cause of complication from that hospitalization. Okay. So, oftentimes it's abbreviated PPD. All right, it occurs in 1 in 7 women, okay? So, just think about how many employees that you have. And oh, by the way, this affects the entire family unit, whether the husband and wife are married or not or what have you. I'm not here to judge, but I'm just saying, look, it affects the entire family unit. So even if the wife isn't or the woman is not on your plan, it affects the entire family unit. The baby might be on your plan. It affects them. The husband might be on your plan. It affects him. It affects the entire family unit. Now, what are the risk factors for them? Well, the American Psychology Association lists 10 risk factors. Guess what? 6 out of those 10 risk factors can actually be in some way intervened on. They're intervenable by the employer or a service that the employer could provide. Okay, what are those things? There's stress in life changes. A challenging baby, not sleeping well at night, having a lot of reflux, what have you. A special needs of the baby. In other words, was the baby born prematurely? Does the baby itself have special medical conditions requiring a lot of doctor visits themselves? Guess what? That increases the risk of postpartum depression in the mother. Okay. Other emotional stressors. It might be something outside of the pregnancy. It might be related to the spouse or the significant other. Who knows what it's related to? Money and job problems. Of course, this is right in the employer's wheelhouse. And then isolation and lack of social support. So I will tell you here in DFW, a gazillion people have moved here for work. Guess who's not here? Their families. Guess what? A lot of these people do not have a lot of friends. I would see this all the time in our community here. Okay, now, the good news is that there are treatments for this. It is treatable, right? Through psychotherapy, in other words, talking to a counselor or a social worker or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, okay, and antidepressants. So taking antidepressant medication. Okay, you're like, okay, well, psychotherapy and antidepressants, that's easy, right? Okay, in the real world, let me tell you how this plays out and how it's a problem and how the employer can help. Okay, the coverage issue for psychotherapy can be challenging for a lot of employee benefit plans. It's like, okay, do you get a certain number of visits over X period of time? What services are covered? What are not covered? It's like the coverage is complicated. Next, a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists, etc., they're either out of network or they won't bill insurance at all. And so that becomes confusing, it might become a money issue. So that is a huge challenge to overcome in regards to psychotherapy. And also just access for especially employers that are in smaller towns or rural areas. There are not a ton of mental health providers around there. So you say, oh, psychotherapy, we're done. Listen, in the real world, it's not that easy. And we would see this at Compass all the time when we were interacting with our members. Okay, next up. antidepressants. Okay, so the good news is that there's tons of wonderful antidepressants that are generic now that have been used in postpartum depression for a long time. Here's the bad news, is that it requires prolonged treatment, not months, maybe even years of being on these medications. And let's say it is a brand name medication that they're on, because oftentimes the person might require an additional medication on top of just one antidepressant. It's very common for folks that take two. Okay, now, that gets into the prior authorization issue from the PBM that has to get like redone, or they'll only give like a 90-day supply. And guess what? They want to fill it like a week early, and they can't fill it a week early because they have 7 pills left. And you're like, okay, but I'm going out of town for a business trip, so it's for work. I would really like to get the additional 7 pills before I run out, and my PBM is telling me no. That is crazy. Okay, so what's my point for today? My point for today is that when people are noodling about complication rates, like the complication rate that employers need to think about is postpartum depression for labor and delivery. And that there are specific programs, none of which I'm associated with, that can address these things from a societal and a social standpoint, because that social support is a huge component of it. And there are things that the employer can do from a benefit standpoint and a benefit design standpoint and from a support standpoint to help out these women and the children and the husband, significant others as well. And that's my point for today. Thank you for watching AHealthcareZ.